Amongst the most infamous methods of mass execution in human history is the use of poison gas, and specifically Zyklon-B, during the Holocaust. Employed by Nazi Germany primarily in extermination camps such as Auschwitz-Birkenau and Majdanek, Zyklon-B was not originally developed for human execution. It began life as a pesticide, but under the Nazi regime it was adopted into a tool of industrial-scale mass murder. The efficiency, anonymity and sheer scale of the killings mark Zyklon-B gassing as one of the most chilling examples of technological adaptation for genocide. Zyklon-B was developed in the early 1920s by a German chemical company named Dagesh. Its active ingredient was hydrogen cyanide, which was absorbed onto a carrier material such as a diatomaceous earth or gypsum, and then sealed into metal canisters. Initially it was used to fumigate ships, warehouses and buildings infested with lice and other pests, lice being a major carrier for typhus in Europe at the time. The product was colourless, but a warning irritant, often a form of pungent compound, was added for safety in civilian use. In the wartime extermination setting, Nazi orders often specified Zyklon-B without this warning odour, removing a sensory clue that could alert victims. The transition from pest control to execution method occurred in 1941. Initially, the Nazi regime experimented with other gases for killing, such as carbon monoxide delivered from vehicle exhausts, which was used in mobile gas vans and at stationary facilities like the Operation Reinhard camps. However, hydrogen cyanide offered several advantages to the SS. It was readily available, relatively cheap, and lethal in very small concentrations. The first experimental use of Zyklon-B on humans took place at Auschwitz in September 1941 in the basement of Block 11, the torture facility. Soviet prisoners of war and Polish inmates were sealed inside, and Zyklon-B pellets were poured in. The result of this was a rapid death on a large scale, convincing Camp Commandant Rudolf Höss and SS doctors of its effectiveness. By 1942, it had become the primary method of execution at Auschwitz-Birkenau. Inside extermination camps, the gassing process was carried out with calculated efficiency. First there was the deception. Victims were often told they were going to take a shower for disinfection. The gas chambers were disguised as bathhouses, complete with fake shower heads, to prevent panic and resistance. Secondly, there was the introduction of the gas. Zyklon-B was stored in sealed metal canisters. When opened, the pellets released hydrogen cyanide gas upon contact with the air. At Auschwitz, pellets were dropped through vents in the roof or poured down side openings, sometimes with fans to distribute the gas evenly. Thirdly, there was a time to death. Hydrogen cyanide acted quickly, especially in warm, humid conditions. Victims typically lost consciousness within minutes, with death following soon after. However, survivor testimony and later forensic reconstructions indicate that in crowded chambers, death could be prolonged for some, as oxygen depletion and chaotic movement affected gas distribution. Then there was the final step, ventilation and body removal. After death was confirmed, ventilation systems or open vents dispersed the remaining gas. Special work units known as the Sonderkommando were forced to remove the bodies, extract valuables such as gold teeth, and prepare the chamber for the next group. The use of Zyklon-B was central to the genocide perpetrated during the Holocaust. At Auschwitz-Birkenau alone, historians estimate that between 1.1 and 1.3 million people were murdered, the majority by Zyklon-B gassing. These victims included Jews from across occupied Europe, Roma and Sinti, Soviet prisoners of war, and others deemed undesirable by Nazi ideology. Zyklon-B was also used at Majdanek and in smaller scale killings at other camps. The industrial nature of the process, regular shipments of Zyklon-B being ordered, stored and logged, illustrates the bureaucratic normalisation of mass murder within the Third Reich and the Nazi state. Hydrogen cyanide, the active agent in Zyklon-B, interferes with cellular respiration by binding to the iron in the cytochrome C oxidase, a key enzyme in the mitochondrial electron transport chain. This blocks the cell's ability to use oxygen, effectively suffocating the body's tissues, even though the blood remains oxygen-rich. Symptoms in victims could include initial dizziness, headaches, rapid breathing, convulsions, and cardiac arrest. Autopsies of early victims showed the characteristic cherry red colorization of the skin caused by the oxygen-rich venous blood. In the gas chambers, these effects were amplified by extreme overcrowding, panic, and physical trauma as people struggled to escape. Survivor accounts and post-war trial testimonies provide stark insight to how Zyklon-B gassings were carried out. One former member of the Sonderkommando at Auschwitz described in his memoir, Eyewitness Auschwitz, how victims often realised too late that they were not entering showers. He recalled the muffled cries and pounding from inside the sealed chambers until silence fell. Rudolf Hirsch, the Auschwitz commandant, testified at the Nuremberg trials that Zyklon-B was used because it was more efficient and quicker than previous methods, and that it allowed for the killing of thousands at a time without direct confrontation between SS guards and the victims. These testimonies also reveal the psychological toll on the Sonderkommando, who were themselves prisoners forced into complicity under the threat of death, and they would one day be led into the chamber themselves. Zyklon-B was manufactured mainly by De Gesch, which was partly owned by IG Farben. Shipments were made to camps under the guise of disinfection supplies. Documents uncovered after the war show the large quantities were diverted from civilian pest control use to the SS, often exceeding any plausible need for delousing. Significantly, Zyklon-B, intended for human execution, lacked the warning irritant. The deliberate omission indicates the chemical suppliers were at least partly aware of its lethal application in camps and were therefore complicit. The use of Zyklon-B as an execution method was a key part of the prosecution case at the Nuremberg trials and the subsequent trial of camp personnel and industrialists. Bruno Tesch and Karl Weinbacher of the firm Tesch and Stabnow, a distributor of Zyklon-B, were tried by the British in 1946 and were punished for knowingly supplying the gas for mass killings. Camp officials, including Rudolf Hirsch, were tried and executed for their roles in organising and overseeing Zyklon-B gassings. These trials established a principle that those supplying means for genocide, even if not directly involved in the specific killings, could be held criminally responsible. The execution method of gassing with Zyklon-B represents one of the darkest intersections of science and state policy. From its origins as a pesticide to its role in the largest genocide of the 20th century, its history is inseparable from the ideology and bureaucracy of Nazi Germany. The method's cold efficiency, its calculated deception, and the staggering scale of the deaths it caused make it not just a chapter in Holocaust history, but a warning about the moral responsibility that comes with technological power. Remembering the history of Zyklon-B gassing is not merely an act of memorialising the victims, it is also a reminder that atrocities are often committed not with exotic weapons, but with ordinary tools repurposed under the influence of destructive ideology. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.